Jeremiah Blackmore had never believed in omens. He was the type of man who laughed at horoscopes, rolled his eyes at tarot cards, and scoffed at the idea that the universe could ever send signs. But if there was ever a night that should have warned him to go home, lock his door, and crawl into bed alone, it was that one. It was a rainy Thursday in downtown Detroit. The kind of sticky, restless summer night where the air felt drunk on humidity, and everything, every siren, every shadow, seemed to pulse with danger. Jeremiah had just wrapped a brutal 10-hour shift on the construction site, and his boots still carried dust from the I-75 freeway expansion. He looked like hell and felt worse. His girlfriend of 4 years had moved out 2 weeks ago, left a note and a spare key. No explanation. Just, don't try to fix what you never care to see was broken. He hadn't cried. Not once. Not because he was too proud, but because he didn't know how anymore. So instead of going home to microwave chicken and empty silence, he pulled into a parking lot off Cass Avenue and walked into the Red Lantern, a dive bar known more for cheap whiskey and dim lighting than for meaningful connections. He told himself it'd be one drink, maybe two, just enough to forget the hollow ache of an apartment with too much space. But then she walked in. She didn't belong there. Not in a place like that. Not with the velvet red dress hugging every inch of her hourglass curves, or those heels that clicked like a metronome announcing something dangerous. Her skin shimmered bronze under the dirty bar lights. Her lips, black cherry. And her eyes? They weren't brown. They weren't hazel. There was something in between like melted gold. Jeremiah saw her from across the bar and instinctively straightened up, brushing drywall dust from his sleeves. She walked past everyone, ignored the stares, dodged the catcalls, and sat 3 stools from him. She didn't order, didn't even look at the bartender, just lit a cigarette like she was waiting for something. He hadn't planned on talking to her, but when their eyes met, she smiled. Not sweet, not flirty, like she already knew something about him he didn't. Like she had read his obituary and was savoring the irony. "You look like you've been building the world," she said. He chuckled. "Something like that. Does it ever build you back?" she asked. Jeremiah blinked. That was the first time in months anyone had asked him a question that made him feel seen. Or maybe it was the gin. Either way, he slid closer. They talked for an hour. Then 2. She never told him where she was from, what she did for work, or why she was there. But she spoke like someone who understood loneliness intimately, who had seen it naked, sobbing, and unshaven at 3 a.m. She introduced herself as Leia. Just Leia. When she leaned in to whisper something, he didn't remember what. The scent of vanilla and something smoky invaded his brain like a drug. He barely recalled paying the tab. He just remembered her hand taking his, her nails cold against his calloused fingers, and the two of them stepping into the wet, black night together. Outside, the storm had softened into drizzle. The streets glistened like glass, reflecting the bar's red neon glow. As they walked toward his truck, she paused, pulled him into the alley beside the building, and kissed him hard. Her mouth was warm, her tongue assertive. He groaned in her lips, losing all sense of time. When they finally reached his apartment, it was nearly 2 a.m. He fumbled the keys. She laughed, a throaty, slow laugh that felt almost predatory. The moment the door shut behind them, she pressed him against it. There was no undressing, just tearing. Her hands moved like she'd memorized his body before she ever touched it. Her hands moved like she'd memorized his body before she ever touched it. But something else caught Jeremiah off guard, something subtle. Her skin was hot, not just warm from arousal or adrenaline, but radiating heat, like she was running a fever. His palms tingled where they touched her, almost like she was charged with static. And then there was her scent, not just perfume, though she smelled like burnt vanilla and clove, but something metallic underneath. Faint, sharp, like ozone or the air right after lightning strikes. It clung to his sheets long after they were tangled in them. The wetness between her thighs wasn't like anything he'd felt before either. Slick, yes, but also slightly cool. For a moment, he wondered if it was his imagination, if maybe his own body was overreacting from stress, the drinks, which is how long it had been. Still, as she moved above him, grinding in deep circles, a thought flickered across his mind. This doesn't feel like sex. It feels like something else, like being altered. But the thought vanished just as quickly as it came, swallowed by her mouth, her weight, her control. Her skin was hot, too hot, but he didn't care. He hadn't been wanted like this in years. Not by someone who made desire feel dangerous. She whispered in his ear, "Tonight, you'll feel everything you've been trying to bury." And she was right. They didn't just have sex. It felt like a ritual, something feral. Her movements were unrelenting. Her control, absolute. Jeremiah had always thought of himself as dominant in bed. But with Leia, he was nothing but clay in her hands. Time bent around them. He didn't know how long it lasted. Hours, maybe. The walls seemed to sweat. The room spun. And at some point, as he lay half-conscious in the sheets, she climbed off him and straddled his chest, her face inches from his, those golden eyes glowing like embers. She leaned down, kissed him slow, then whispered, "I left something inside you." Before he could ask what she meant, she smiled, climbed off the bed, and walked naked into the bathroom. He must have dozed off. The last thing he remembered was the sound of the shower running, then silence. When he woke up, she was gone. And so was everything he thought he knew about pain. At first, Jeremiah thought it was a dream, the kind that hovered on the edge of consciousness, foggy and dripping with desire. He was vaguely aware of movement, her body crawling back into bed, her thighs pressing against his, her breath hot against his throat. But it wasn't sleep. Not anymore. When her fingers curled around him again, he gasped. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her touch was command enough. Leia moved with intention, with rhythm, with something that felt almost inhuman in its precision, like she knew exactly what would make him forget his name, his past, his pain. Her skin was slick, warm, impossibly smooth. Every inch of her body was like a weapon wrapped in silk. Jeremiah gripped her hips, but she pushed his hands away. "Let me," she said, barely a whisper. So he did. And what followed wasn't just sex, it was surrender. She rode him like a slow, grinding ritual. Her eyes never left his, unblinking, watching him unravel with each thrust. It was the kind of eye contact that made your chest tight. Not with love, not even with lust, but with something more primal. Something that reached into your bones and made you feel hunted. At one point, she bit his shoulder hard. Not playful, not sexy. And when he winced, she licked the wound. "Pain is proof you're alive," she murmured. Time fractured after that. They moved from the bed to the floor, to the kitchen counter, back to the bed. Each time he thought he was spent, she pulled him back into her orbit, coaxing him, draining him, praising him with a low hum that sounded more like a purr than a voice. And something strange began to happen. At first, it was just heat. He figured it was adrenaline. But by the fourth time, yes, fourth, he started to feel a burn. Not the good kind. A deep, internal sting that bloomed with every motion, like friction from the inside out. But Leia didn't stop. If anything, she moved harder, faster. Her hair stuck to her face with sweat. Her mouth opened wide in a silent moan that seemed unhinged. And her eyes, those golden eyes, were no longer soft. They were wild, glowing. Jeremiah tried to speak, tried to say he needed to stop, that something felt wrong. But his throat was dry, his tongue numb, his limbs heavy. It felt like being drugged, but without the fog. He was fully aware of everything. Every pulse, every ache, every inch of her. But he couldn't resist, couldn't pull away. His body was no longer his. She finished on top of him, her hands pressing hard against his chest, her back arched, her breath shallow. Then she collapsed onto him, skin burning hot like fever. For a moment there was silence, just the ticking of the ceiling fan and the sound of their breathing. That's when she whispered again, "I left something inside you." He blinked, heart hammering. "What?" he croaked. She smiled in the dark. "You'll feel it soon." Then she rolled over, grabbed her purse, and disappeared into the bathroom. Jeremiah lay there, naked and sweating, trying to catch his breath. His body felt like it had been broken open, sore, drained, but also tainted. There was something oily in the air, like burnt plastic. He glanced toward the bathroom door. The shower had started. He forced himself up, stumbling to the sink in the kitchen to drink water straight from the faucet. His reflection in the window was pale, eyes sunken. He looked like he'd just run a marathon through hell. After a few minutes, the water stopped. But Leia didn't come out. He knocked once. "Hey, you good?" No answer. He cracked the door open. The bathroom was empty. Steam still clung to the mirror, but the window above the tub was wide open. A gust of cold night air blew in. Her clothes were gone. So was her purse. No towel. No phone. No trace. It was as if she had evaporated into the mist. Jeremiah staggered back, confused, naked, the ache in his lower body growing sharper. He collapsed back into bed, trying to convince himself it was just weird, not dangerous. Maybe she was unstable. Maybe she was just scared. Maybe she was a sex addict with a flair for drama. But then came the cramp. Low, deep, like something twisting. He winced, pulling the blanket over his stomach. And as the first rays of morning crept through the blinds, a searing pain bloomed between his legs. Hot, acidic, and utterly alien. He yelped, sitting up, throwing the sheets back, and froze. His penis was red, inflamed. Tiny lesions had formed along the shaft. The skin looked like it was peeling, like it had been burned. He stared, heart racing. Then came the blood, a slow, thick bead seeping from a small tear in the flesh. Jeremiah's scream echoed through the apartment. It was only 7:12 a.m., and his nightmare had just begun. Jeremiah Blackmore was naked, bleeding, and screaming. He didn't know what hurt more, the burning sensation radiating through his groin like acid, or the sight of his own flesh peeling in strips like sunburn turned satanic. The pain wasn't just physical. It was spiritual, existential, like something sacred was being destroyed inside him. He stumbled out of bed, tripping over his jeans on the floor, knocking over a lamp with a loud crash. The light bulb shattered, but he barely noticed. He made it to the bathroom and flicked on the light. That's when he saw it in full. The skin around the head of his penis was blistering. Pink, raw, and weeping a yellowish fluid. The veins looked dark, almost black. Tiny specks of pus bubbled beneath the surface. The opening was red and puckered, like it had been scalded. He screamed again, but it came out hoarse. His legs buckled, and he collapsed to the tile, sobbing. He tried to clean himself, used lukewarm water, trembling hands, even antiseptic wipes. But the moment the liquid touched his skin, he convulsed in pain so sharp he nearly blacked out. His hands shook as he picked up his phone and dialed 911. When the dispatcher answered, he couldn't form full sentences. There's blood. It's melting, he gasped. Sir, are you injured? Down there, he groaned. My dick. It's coming apart. Silence. Then the dispatcher calmly said, an ambulance is on its way. Stay on the line. But Jeremiah couldn't wait. He threw on sweatpants, no underwear, and barely managed to shove his feet into mismatched shoes. Every step was fire. He made it down the stairs of his apartment complex, gripping the handrail with white knuckles, panting like a man being hunted. By the time he reached the parking lot, the pain had spread to his inner thighs. The skin there itched, burned, crawled. He vomited once, right on the hood of his car, then climbed in and drove himself to Detroit Mercy Hospital, running red lights and almost hitting 2 pedestrians on the way. When he arrived at the ER entrance, he staggered out, collapsed to his knees, and screamed for help. A nurse rushed to him, and when she asked what was wrong, he simply sobbed, "I'm losing my dick." They brought him in on a wheelchair. The triage nurse took one look beneath the waistband of his pants and turned pale. Within minutes, he was surrounded by trauma staff, wheeled into a curtained bay, stripped, and examined. The attending physician, Dr. Wyatt, had worked gunshot wounds, chainsaw accidents, even frostbitten limbs from Michigan's brutal winters, but he had never seen anything like this. There was tissue necrosis, he would later testify, localized to the penis and beginning to spread toward the scrotum and upper thighs. The rate of progression was shocking. They started 4 antibiotics immediately, thinking it was necrotizing fasciitis, flesh-eating bacteria. But Jeremiah had no open wounds, no injuries, no cuts. The onset had been too fast, too sudden. The ER staff asked about STDs, allergic reactions, chemical burns, but none of it made sense. His blood work came back normal. No infections, no HIV, no STDs, nothing explainable. Then things got worse. Around noon, just 5 hours after he'd woken up, Jeremiah's foreskin completely sloughed off. It peeled like wet paper. The shaft had darkened to a sickly shade of purple, and black lines began to form under the skin, like roots of rot spreading from the inside. He was taken to emergency urology. Dr. Colin Vargas, a surgeon, examined him and ordered an immediate debridement, cutting away dead tissue to save what remained. When Jeremiah was wheeled into the operating room, he begged them through tears, "Please don't take it. Please don't cut it off." Dr. Vargas didn't answer. In the surgical report, he would later write, "The penile tissue exhibited signs consistent with acute autolysis, a process typically observed in post-mortem decomposition. In layman's terms, his genitals were rotting, as if he'd been dead for days. But he wasn't. He was very much alive, conscious, suffering. The doctors saved what they could, but by the time he left the OR, over half of his penis had been removed. When Jeremiah woke up in post-op, numb and swaddled in gauze, he asked for Leah. "Where is she?" he croaked. "What did she do to me?" The nurses exchanged looks. "Sir," one of them said gently, "there's no record of her. No ID. No fingerprints. She never checked in. She's not here." Jeremiah stared at the ceiling. And for the first time since this nightmare began, he cried. Not from pain, but from fear. That whatever had just happened to him wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. The name Leah Monroe didn't exist. Not in the DMV. Not in police databases. Not even on social media. Detective Natalie Rourke, a seasoned officer with the Detroit Homicide Unit, leaned back in her chair, squinting at the bar surveillance footage from the Red Lantern. The timestamp read 12:47 a.m., just minutes before Jeremiah Blackmore left with a mystery woman who, by morning, had nearly annihilated his manhood. The camera caught a partial view of her face. High cheekbones, dark skin, a flash of red velvet. She turned to look at Jeremiah mid-laugh, and that's when Natalie froze the frame. The eyes, they were unmistakable. Gold, almost glowing like cat eyes under moonlight. Natalie zoomed in, enhanced the resolution, but the image was too grainy. Still, it was enough. She'd seen those eyes before. 2 months ago. Different victim. Same story. Case number 38217. Randy Felix, 28, found in his apartment screaming in agony, genital area heavily necrotized. Claimed he'd met a stranger in a red dress at a hookah lounge. Said she rode him like she owned his soul and vanished before sunrise. Same bizarre rot. Same missing identity. Back then, they chalked it up to an aggressive bacterial infection. But now, Natalie knew. This wasn't random. She ran the bar footage through the statewide facial recognition database. No match. She tried again with a different program, one used for military fugitives and off-the-grid operatives. This time, she got a hit. A classified file. Restricted access. A name, Lia Monet Grant. Born in Georgia. No current address. No criminal record. No employment. The only available data point was a medical clearance form from 2020 tied to a Department of Defense-funded program labeled Project Noox. Natalie's pulse ticked faster. She made a call. It took 36 hours and a federal warrant, but eventually she got her hands on a redacted report from a now-defunct facility in Nevada. The project's mission? Experimental integration of engineered microbiomes for non-lethal incapacitation. Female test subjects were selected for symbiotic pairing with genetically modified bacteria capable of enzymatic decay. In plain English, they were trying to create biological weapons inside women. And Leia, if that was even her real name, was one of the test subjects. The program was supposed to shut down in 2021 after a security breach and an unexplained fatal incident. But what if she'd slipped through the cracks? What if she'd escaped? What if she was still active? Back in the hospital, Jeremiah was recovering, or at least trying to. The morphine dulled the pain, but not the trauma. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, beautiful, otherworldly, terrifying. He gave Detective Rourke everything he remembered. The bar, the drinks, her voice, her scent. Even the way she whispered, "I left something inside you." When Natalie showed him the freeze frame from surveillance, his body tensed. "That's her," he whispered. "That's the bitch." Rourke nodded. "You're not the only one." She pulled out 2 more case files and laid them on a hospital tray. Elias Drew, 33. Personal trainer. Hospitalized for penile necrosis. Survived but lost 75% of tissue. Marcus Feldman, 41. Financial advisor. Found dead in his apartment. Genitals completely eroded. Official cause, septic shock. Unexplained origin. "She's been doing this a while," Natalie said. "We think she may be targeting specific men, but we don't know why." Jeremiah stared down at the photos of the other victims. Strong, successful, all sexually active, all seduced, all destroyed. "She didn't rob me," he said slowly. "She didn't even take anything. So what the hell does she want?" Natalie didn't answer, because she didn't know. The media caught wind of the story 3 days later, after someone leaked Jeremiah's ER report. The headlines exploded. "The Detroit castrator. Is a female serial killer on the loose?" "Men are melting. 3 victims, 1 woman in red. Biological weapon or urban legend?" Online forums lit up with conspiracy theories. Some called her Lilith Reborn. Others claimed she was a sex demon. A few even suggested she was an avenging spirit targeting toxic men. The truth was less supernatural, but far more terrifying. Natalie followed a lead to a former microbiologist from Project Noox, Dr. Elliot Rames, now living in a remote cabin in Minnesota under government silence orders. She flew out to see him. When she mentioned Leia's name, he went pale. "She wasn't supposed to survive," he muttered. "She was unstable. The bacteria bonded too well. We couldn't remove it. She started leaking enzymes even when dormant. It wasn't just contagious, it was hungry." Rourke frowned. "Hungry?" Rames nodded. "The bacteria fed on soft tissue, mucous membranes, collagen. It didn't matter if the host consented. Once activated, it devoured any living male flesh it touched. It became selective. Selective how? Only men. Only through penetration. We thought it was psychological. Then we realized it had adapted. He paused. She's not the host anymore, he said. She's the delivery system. Back in Detroit, Jeremiah received an anonymous envelope at the hospital. No return address. Inside was a note written in crimson ink. Don't worry. I didn't take everything, but I gave you something no one else ever will. A reason to never use it again. There was also a small vial. Clear. Sealed. A drop of viscous fluid floated inside, swirling with tiny particles like metallic dust. The hospital's lab ran it through 4 systems. No known substance. Not viral. Not bacterial. Not chemical. Just other. That night, as the rain returned to Detroit and washed the streets clean, Natalie sat alone in her office, staring at the photos of Leia. And for the first time in her career, she wasn't sure if she was chasing a suspect or a new kind of predator, one evolved not to rob, not to kill, but to punish. She didn't hate men. That was the first thing Leia had told Dr. Rames during her initial intake interview at Fort Kiernan Research Facility back in 2019. She was 24, handpicked for her genetic markers, resilience to immune anomalies, and psychological stability, or so they thought. I don't hate men, she repeated. I just don't feel anything when they look at me. At first, the program saw that as a strength. She could dissociate. She wouldn't get attached. She could carry the organism, strain Noox 27B, without fear, shame, or guilt. In their eyes, she wasn't vulnerable. But they were wrong. Leia Monroe, or rather Leia Monet Grant, had always been vulnerable, just not in the ways they measured. Abandoned at birth, raised in group homes, survived 2 assaults before she turned 18. Men had always taken things from her, her safety, her voice, her choices. Project Noox offered something different, control. And when the injections began and her body started to change, she didn't resist. Not when the enzymes fused to her vaginal walls. Not when her pH levels spiked beyond medical comprehension. Not even when one of the lab pigs exposed to her fluid lost its genitals within 15 minutes of contact. In fact, she smiled. She became symbiotic with it. Dr. Rames explained to Detective Rourke, his voice low and tinged with guilt. Not infected, not poisoned. She and the bacteria became one. In a folder buried deep in the Fort Kiernan archives, hidden under layers of classified clearance, there exists a single page torn from a patient journal. The handwriting is uneven, the ink smudged by tears. It reads, Day 76. The tests keep going. I can't feel the difference between where I end and the thing inside me begins. They said the bacteria bonded. They said it's working. I smiled when they told me, because I thought maybe if I gave them what they wanted, they'd stop touching me. But they don't stop. They stare like I'm already dead, like I'm just skin around something valuable. I told Dr. Rames I can feel it breathing in me. Not metaphorically, really. When I'm alone, it pulses. Like a second heart, but lower. Like it's dreaming. They want to send me out there. Let me hurt people. But what they don't understand is that I already did a long time ago. When I was 15. When I said yes to someone who didn't ask. And I bled for 3 days. I thought maybe this thing growing in me was justice. Now I think it's just a mirror. I'm scared I'm starting to love it. Natalie was silent, scribbling notes. Rames continued. There was a moment, early on, when we noticed something unusual. When she was sexually aroused, the enzyme activity increased tenfold. But she showed no external reaction, no inflammation, no fever, no sign of pain. And you kept using her anyway? Natalie asked coldly. Rames looked away. She volunteered. And once we realized how effective she was, the Pentagon got involved. There was talk of deploying her to enemy camps, using her as a seduction weapon. Natalie's stomach turned. You wanted to make her a walking Trojan horse. She was perfect, Rames said, until she disappeared. That disappearance, Natalie would later learn, came after a test subject, a military contractor, died during intercourse with Leia in a controlled environment. His genital tissue had liquefied in under 30 minutes. Leia never returned to the facility. Surveillance footage showed her walking out calmly, dressed in a red sweater and jeans, carrying nothing but a government-issued duffel bag. Security never stopped her. She wasn't considered a threat. At the time, back in Detroit, Jeremiah was struggling to recover, not just physically but mentally. Despite the surgeries, the counseling, the medication, he couldn't stop reliving that night. The way her eyes bore into him. The way she said she left something inside. His manhood, both literal and symbolic, was gone. But deeper than the loss of flesh was a growing paranoia. What if it's still in me? Doctors told him there were no lingering bacteria. Lab tests were clear. But the fear didn't listen to reason. At night, he swore he could feel something moving in his lower abdomen. A pressure, a tingling, sometimes a flutter. He began researching parasitic infections. Spent hours on forums about biological warfare experiments gone wrong. He even bought a mirror and flashlight to check himself. Daily. It wasn't just trauma anymore. It was obsession. One night, he scrawled a note in his journal. She didn't want to kill me. She wanted to change me. And I think she did. Meanwhile, Natalie Rourke expanded the investigation. She uncovered 5 more possible victims, men in different states, all with similar stories. Met a woman in red. Had mind-blowing sex. Woke up to rot. No trace of her after. And in every case, one chilling consistency. None of the men were in relationships. All had histories of casual sex. Several had allegations of misconduct or emotional abuse. One was even under federal investigation for sex trafficking, though that had never gone public. Natalie circled the word in her notebook. Pattern. This wasn't random. It was selective. Could Leia somehow sense these men? Or worse, had someone given her a list? The FBI tried to bury the project in Noox files. Claimed it was disbanded. Denied knowledge of Leia Grant. Said she died in a training accident. But Natalie knew the truth now. They created her. They lost her. And now, they couldn't stop her. Not without killing her. But that was the problem. You couldn't kill what had already evolved beyond recognition. 3 weeks later, a package arrived at a local news station in Chicago. No return address. Inside, a USB drive. A handwritten note. Let the world know what they built. A black thong. Bloodstained. The USB contained a single video. In it, Leia stood in front of a mirror holding a phone. She was calm, beautiful, silent. Then she spoke. They tried to weaponize me, but the weapon grew teeth. I'm not a monster. I'm a mirror. She smiled. Then the screen went black. Jeremiah saw the clip on Twitter. It went viral in under 4 hours. That night, he dreamed of her again. Naked, eyes glowing. But this time, she wasn't on top of him. She was inside him, smiling. There are 2 kinds of government experiments. The kind that make the news, and the kind that are never meant to. Project Noox was the second kind. Launched in 2017 under the umbrella of DARPA's Advanced Threat Response Division, it was officially categorized as a biomedical counterinsurgency development. But behind the vague jargon was a far more disturbing mission: to biologically engineer a human host capable of discreetly delivering sexually transmitted enzymatic destruction to male combatants. In simpler terms, create a woman who could kill a man by sleeping with him. The idea was born from the failures of psychological operations in Afghanistan and the logistical nightmares of drone warfare in urban zones. Instead of targeting heads of insurgent networks with missiles or snipers, Why not send in someone who could get close, intimately close, and make the death look like a natural breakdown of the body? Untraceable, silent, genius, and monstrous. Natalie Rourke found the truth buried beneath layers of bureaucratic sludge, hidden in coded PDF files and scanned memos with redacted lines thick as tar. Most whistleblowers were either dead, relocated, or terrified into silence. But one former analyst, a man named Arthur Winslow, agreed to talk. He was pale, twitchy, and met her in the back of an abandoned diner in Gary, Indiana, surrounded by boarded windows and flickering lights. She was one of 10, he said, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. 10 what? Subjects, recruited under different names. Promised free housing, education, and reproductive health research stipends. Most of them didn't make it past phase 2. The enzyme rejected them, caused internal hemorrhaging. But her, he exhaled. She bonded. Natalie leaned forward. What was the enzyme? Modified flesh-eating strain, he whispered, based on Pseudomonas aeruginosa, but enhanced with anaerobic resilience. It was designed to activate under pressure, literally. Friction, body heat, hormonal shifts. Perfect for sexual transmission. Natalie's skin crawled. She was never meant to live long, Winslow continued. She was supposed to be field-tested, evaluated, and then neutralized. You know how this works. And she escaped? Not exactly. His eyes narrowed. She walked. She was let out. She walked straight out of Fort Kiernan after a containment breach that killed 2 guards and melted a portion of the observation room. No one stopped her. She was calm, focused, and she took something with her. What? Winslow's voice dropped. A second strain. The implications hit Natalie like a gut punch. If the original enzyme, Noox 27B, was designed to kill, then what the hell was the second one? She requested a forensic reanalysis of the bloodied thong from the Chicago news station drop. The lab called her 3 days later. Whatever's in this fabric, the technician said, it isn't just Noox 27B. It's something else, something smarter. It contains dormant RNA, strands that adapt to host DNA on contact. It's not just targeting male tissue. It's learning from it. That's when Natalie knew they were out of time. Meanwhile, Jeremiah Blackmore's mental state was spiraling. He'd stopped eating, stopped sleeping. He spent every night digging into online conspiracy forums, tracking posts about women in red, unexplained genital injuries, and military cover-ups. He believed, fully, that the enzyme was still inside him, that it hadn't finished yet. I'm incubating, he said in a live stream he posted to Reddit at 2:14 a.m., eyes bloodshot, voice trembling. They think I survived, but I didn't. I'm just the next phase. The video was deleted an hour later, but not before it hit 85,000 views and triggered a wave of panic online. Men began avoiding sex. Bars emptied. Tinder use dropped 40% in Detroit overnight. People started calling it the red dress plague. At Quantico, a confidential Homeland Security briefing was held behind closed doors. Project Noox, they admitted, had gone rogue. But the real horror wasn't that one subject had escaped. It was that they'd lost track of all 10. Leah Grant, Leah Monroe, was just the beginning. 3 others were confirmed dead. 2 were in permanent vegetative states. But 4 were unaccounted for. And the modified enzyme? It had been replicated, accidentally or intentionally. The data wasn't clear. What was clear? They built a weapon that couldn't be turned off. And worse, a weapon with agency. Natalie presented her findings to her superiors. They told her to back off. Too high level, they said. You've done enough, they said. Let it go, they said. So she didn't. She quit. 3 days later, her apartment was broken into. No valuables taken. Just her laptop, her case notes, and her gun. She took it as a message. She also took it as confirmation she was right. The last verified sighting of Leah came from Milwaukee. A hotel receptionist reported a woman in a red trench coat checking in under the name on AR. She paid in cash. No luggage. No ID. She was seen entering room 409 with a man around 9:15 p.m. By morning, he was dead, naked, alone, and his body had begun decomposing from the groin outward, despite being dead less than 6 hours. It was ruled sudden systemic necrosis of unknown origin. The surveillance footage? Corrupted. The room? Sterilized before forensics could arrive. Leah had vanished again. Natalie sat in her darkened apartment that night, window shades drawn, a Glock on her lap. The USB Leah had sent to the news station was looping on her monitor again. I'm not a monster. I'm a mirror. But Natalie didn't believe that anymore. Leah was something new, something man had built, something woman had become. And whatever she was planning next, it wouldn't stop at the bedroom. It would start there, but it would end with fire. 3 months after his release from the hospital, Jeremiah Blackmore stopped answering his phone. His family thought he was depressed. His friends assumed he was ashamed. But the truth was darker, quieter, and more deliberate. He'd sold his apartment in Detroit, liquidated his assets, and disappeared from every online platform. No social media, no banking activity. His therapist said he spoke often of cleansing, of becoming something else. The last thing he told her was this: if she comes again, I want to be ready. She thought it was a trauma response. She was wrong. Jeremiah reappeared 6 weeks later in Savannah, Georgia, under the alias Reuben King, renting a room above a closed bookstore. He kept the lights off, covered the windows in blackout film. His walls were lined with notes, photos, red string, and crude sketches of a woman in a red dress. Every night, he watched the same video, the one Leah had sent to the news station. Paused it, zoomed it, watched her lips, her pupils, her shoulders, looking for something, anything that would tell him who she really was or what she was becoming. Because deep down, Jeremiah didn't believe she was human anymore. He didn't even believe he was. The doctors had said the enzyme was gone. The labs were clean. The tissue was removed. But Jeremiah knew better. He could feel it. Something still lived in him. Something dormant, curled deep inside like a fetus made of hunger. He felt it when he touched water, when he touched himself, when he dreamed. And in those dreams, she came back. Every time. Then, on a rain-slicked Thursday evening in February, she returned for real. He was standing in the aisle of a 24-hour pharmacy, looking for iodine and gauze, when he saw her reflection in the freezer glass, just behind him. Red coat. No umbrella. No shoes. He turned slowly, heart-pounding. She stood there silently, not smiling, not seductive, just watching. Her eyes were still gold. Leah, he whispered. She tilted her head. I knew you'd find me, he said. I never lost you, she replied. They left the store without speaking again, walked through the quiet streets like old lovers, like ghosts. When they reached his apartment, he opened the door for her. She stepped inside, and for the first time since Detroit, they touched again. But it wasn't sex. Not this time. It was something else entirely. She lay on the bed while he sat beside her, both fully clothed. The room was cold, lit only by the faint orange glow from a dying street lamp outside. I never meant to hurt you, she said finally. Jeremiah didn't reply. She looked at him. You asked me once what I left inside you. He nodded. I'll show you. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small silver tube, identical to the one that had once held the original Noox enzyme. Then she held out her hand. Give me yours, she whispered. Jeremiah hesitated. Then slowly, he reached under the bed and retrieved a vial. It had been sitting in a lead-lined box, surrounded by medical ice packs, for weeks. Leia looked at it, smiled. They said you'd break, she murmured. But you didn't. You bonded. Jeremiah looked at her, eyes wide. You mean You're the first male carrier, she said softly. And you survived. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then she leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't passionate. It was ceremonial. Then, without a word, she pressed the vial to his palm and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. The others will come. When they do, don't hide what you are. Then she was gone. Jeremiah stood at the center of the burned-out church, surrounded by flickering candles and women in red. Some of them watched with reverence, others with hunger, but all of them were silent. Leia stood across from him, holding the golden vial in her palm. "Are you ready?" she asked. His voice shook, but he didn't hesitate. "I am." She stepped forward, dipped her finger into the vial, and smeared a drop across his lips. He trembled, not from fear, but from awe. Then he took her hand, raised it to his mouth, and kissed the same finger. Around them, the women began to chant softly, not in words, but in rhythm. A breath, a hum, like the sound of something ancient waking up. Leia looked into his eyes. "You understand what this means?" Jeremiah nodded. "It means no more silence." She smiled. "No more shame." He echoed, louder now. "No more shame." Then she pulled him close and whispered, "Then go. Touch the world." What happened next spread across the country in less than 48 hours. 2 bodies were found in a motel room outside Jacksonville, Florida. Both male, both exhibiting rapid penile and scrotal necrosis. Autopsy revealed unfamiliar bacterial signatures that matched none of the previous Noox strains. The victims had been involved in a sex party. A third man was hospitalized, raving about a man with glowing eyes who had touched him, just touched, before the symptoms started. That man? Confirmed to be Reuben King, a.k.a. Jeremiah Blackmore. He disappeared before authorities could detain him. Vanished. Like her. Detective Natalie Rourke received the news 2 days later in the back seat of a black Suburban outside D.C. She'd been reinstated temporarily to assist the Department of Homeland Security. They'd given her a dossier. On him. Subject Delta. Male carrier. Spontaneous mutation of Noox strain. Capable of transmission via dermal contact. Unknown control threshold. Current status. Uncontained. She flipped the last page. There was a photo. Jeremiah, sitting at a bus stop in Savannah. Hoodie up, looking straight into the camera. Smiling. That night, in a burned-out church somewhere outside New Orleans, a group of women in red gathered by candlelight. At the center stood Leia, and next to her him. They held hands, and in their joined palms, a single new vial. Clear. Gold-tinged, alive, and the words on the candle-lit altar behind them read, "The cure for men is inside U.S." It didn't start with an explosion. There was no press conference, no alarms, no curfew, no tanks rolling through the streets. Just a slow, quiet panic. In St. Louis, a 29-year-old bartender was found dead in his apartment. His body discovered 2 days after he failed to show up for work. His cause of death? Unknown genital necrosis. His roommate said he'd brought home a woman in a red hoodie. No name, no ID, no trace. In Oakland, California, a college professor collapsed during office hours. His groin was swollen, blackened. He died before the ambulance arrived. Students later said he had been acting strange all week. Hypersexual, paranoid, twitchy. In Atlanta, 3 men checked into an upscale hotel for a bachelor party. Only one checked out. He had no memory of what happened, but tests showed a sudden shift in bacterial flora inside his body, specifically in his saliva and under his fingernails. He hadn't had sex. He had only shaken hands. By the time the CDC took notice, Local hospitals were already overwhelmed with groin rot cases, a crude name that belied the biological horror behind it. The symptoms mimicked necrotizing fasciitis, but didn't respond to antibiotics. The bacteria didn't show up on standard cultures, and it only targeted men. At first, back in D.C., Detective Natalie Rourke sat in the back row of a congressional hearing, watching a series of stone-faced men discuss national security threats in monotone voices. They spoke of a viral misinformation campaign, of hysteria fueled by conspiracy theorists. They didn't say her name. They never mentioned Leia, or Jeremiah, or Project Noox. But she saw the fear in their eyes. They weren't debating if it was real. They were wondering how long they could keep pretending it wasn't. Somewhere in Kansas, a mother found a note in her teenage son's backpack. It read, "Don't touch her if she's wearing red. Don't kiss her. Don't even talk to her. She's one of them now." She asked him what it meant. He wouldn't answer. That night, he locked his door and never opened it again. The virus didn't spread like a disease. It spread like a story, like a whisper passed between bar stools, behind bathroom doors, in locker rooms and confessionals. It spread like guilt, like shame, like memory. Men started to fear sex, not for pregnancy, not for STDs, but for consequence. Because now, every woman was a question. Every touch was a risk. Every moan was a warning. In a church basement in Baton Rouge, a group of women met in secret. They were doctors, waitresses, mothers, survivors. They didn't have vials or enzymes, but they had something else: belief. One of them stood up and said, what they did to her was evil, but what she became, that's justice. And if she's still out there, we should help her. The room applauded, silently, fiercely. Weeks later, in a market in Lagos, Nigeria, a man collapsed screaming. The tissue around his groin had begun disintegrating within hours of what he claimed was the best sex of his life. The woman he'd met? Black dress, gold eyes. She had asked him only one thing before they slept together. Do you respect women? He laughed. She didn't. In a quiet apartment in Berlin, a hacker decrypted a copy of the original Noox genome code and uploaded it to the dark web. Within 4 days, it had been downloaded 6,732 times. Some called it terrorism. Some called it justice. But in certain corners of the internet, it had a different name. The antidote to patriarchy. 1 month later, a video appeared in the deep web. Leia sat beneath a flickering light bulb. Her hair was tied back, her eyes tired. She didn't smile this time. She simply looked into the camera and said, "You made me a weapon, but I became a message." She paused, then added, "And it's already been delivered." In transmission, the virus didn't just spread through blood. It spread through silence, through secrets, through men too ashamed to speak, and women too afraid to stop. The world didn't end in fire. It ended in fear of touch. And in some ways, that was worse.